And just take a look at this totally gorgeous mechanism, because this, guys, is what a minute repeater looks like under the dial, or at least this minute repeater, which was made by the famous watchmaker Henry Daniel Capt, or at least under his name, in the latter part of the 19th century. And I did an earlier video on this watch, which I think you should watch, because Henry Capt, of course, was born within 4 years of Napoleon Bonaparte, and in my earlier video I traced the history of both those men. So if you're interested in watches and the history of Napoleonic War, then you know that's a really good video to check out. But in this video we turn our attention really to the horology inside this totally gorgeous solid gold watch, and I've broken it down into 2 chunks because it's quite a complex mechanism. In fact, it's the most complex complication that you can have inside a watch. So we're going to do this in 2 chunks. This is the first part of the rebuild of this totally gorgeous minute repeater in solid gold by Henry Capt. Guys, if you've ever wondered what a minute repeater looks like, then wonder no more, because you are looking here at about half of it. This is primarily the components that run the minute repeater complication itself, and those are dial side on the main plate that you can see there. The rest of the watch is actually over here, and although, you know, for those of you who know how a minute repeater works, you'll notice a few components there which are minute repeater components. A lot of the stuff in here is just the normal going train for the watch. Inside the plastic container there with the foam inside it is the balance. And yeah, this is my kind of general organization for this. And if I just sweep up here for a second and focus, you get an idea then of the, you know, complexity that we have here. And you know, it is pouring down with rain here in Wales today, and I have stretching out in front of me, God willing, some hours in which, you know, I'm just the luckiest guy in the world, because I get to put together this just fantastic watch by Henry Capt. And you know, have to bear in mind that these pieces, this was made by hand mostly, and you know, this is just such fine craftsmanship. And as I put it together, I often wonder, just, you know, how did these guys do this? You know, these guys didn't even have electricity, or someone will probably correct me on that, in 1888, but you know, they certainly didn't have hods of it. And you know, most of this was done in natural daylight. Just phenomenal work. The only thing I have not shown you is there are more pieces. In this box here we have the case and the bezel. Okay, it's 18 karat solid gold. I've also made a repair to the exhibition bezel that's in there. So there's the new turned hinge bar in there, which I turned on the lathe prior to doing this work now. So can't remember what luff was. I think it was the thing that holds my glasses on while I'm working, the little strap at the back. Anyway, came in a great box, really useful. So guys, don't want to labor this too much, but you know, check this watch out. This is a phenomenal watch, and in this video I'm going to show you this going back together. I'm going to stop at important places and just show you the, you know, how this thing works, and yeah, just what a great watch it is. So let's crack on. Now, movement like this, which is special and historical, needs particular care whilst you are working on it. So I have actually created a special movement stand, and you can see that on the screen now. Created it in Fusion 360, and this is primarily for working on the minute repeater complication, which is dial side up. So you can see here that I've built in this gap here so that the lever for the initiation of the minute repeater has room to work, and also the setting lever sticks out proud of the movement, so there we need a gap for it there. The gongs can hang down here really quite you know, so that sort of the gongs hang down below the top there, and let's see if I can get this to do its thing. And yeah, so anyway, had some fun doing this. And here we are then with the digital printing of the movement holder in progress. As you can see, I've done it in clear plastic, or resin rather. So yeah, looking good. Now I've just put half of the components through the ultrasonic cleaner, and I just wanted to show you how gorgeous they come out. Look at these wheels. These are like they would have been back in 1888. Glistening there, that little plate there with the pale jewels, all of which are in very good nick. Just look at how shiny these individual components, and this is part of the joy of, you know, doing this work, to make sure that all of this goes back in a really nice condition. And just look at the work. That is the wheel underneath the spring that powers the minute repeater mechanism, and just look at the work inside that. You know, that's probably about sort of 8 millimeters across, just to give you an idea of scale. So right, going to start putting this lot back now. In fact, the components that you can see here are largely the regulation components of the minute repeater mechanism, because of course we have to regulate the rate at which the spring releases its energy, because that dictates the distance, if you like, between each gong beat. So this is almost a little power train in its own right. So even before we get into the watch and the minute repeater, we've got another little watch here. So, you know, it's quite a complicated beast. But anyway, let's crack on. And this then is the regulation train for the minute repeater mechanism. And it's quite small, this. So guys, if you are doing this, it's a bit like doing, you know, a very small Rolex or Omega, a lady's watch, except for you'll find that it's a little bit more tricky because the arbors are longer than that, and everything isn't quite as accurate. I mean, it's really good, but you do have to be very patient and you know, really jiggle the pivots in, because if you're going to break something, it's probably one of those tiny little pivots that you can see in the center of the frame there. But as you can see, everything is very shiny and clean, and I'm just going to pop on now the bridge that holds, you know, these 3 pivots together that you can see here in the center of the frame, and also creates the enclosure for the spring that drives, you know, in a going barrel sense, the main wheel that you can see in the center of the frame there. And that's the power for the minute repeater mechanism. So just going to pop that on now. And here we are. And here we are then with the enclosure for the spring that powers the repeater mechanism in place. Now guys, you do have to be really careful with this. It's like it's like doing pretty much a whole little watch, because it's got its own little powertrain there, and the pivots are particularly small and the arbors are quite long, so you do have to be really careful, make sure that it's all in place, and don't tighten down the anything really until you watch it doing this. Okay, if you can see here, we've got the component that we use. This is the regulation pin here. Just try and get that in focus. There's a regulation pin here which limits the amount that this component can swing back and forth. Okay, now it's the swinging back and forth and the degree to which it swings back and forth that dictates how quickly the spring will wind down, and that's how it works. But you've got to watch it actually working before you tighten everything up. So if I just do this again, just move this in here, just watch this. It's got to be working like this, fellas, before you actually tighten anything up. Now that is all tightened up now, and we're ready to move on to the next part, which is putting the gongs on. So let's crack on. Okay, we've got a little bit of building work going on, but I'm going to try and work through it and explain the basic operation of the minute repeater complication, and some of the key components, if I can keep them still, are moving around there on the bench in front of us. I'll just try and get them nicely in focus there, because we have got here the minute snail and the quarter snail. This is the quarter rack, this is the minute rack, this is the hour rack, this is the hour rack feeler gauge, and this is the hour snail. Now, to cut a very long story short, this is the way it works. The main going train drives around the hour snail and the quarter snail and the minute snail in the normal way. So these are revolving all the time as the watch is working. Now, at the moment in time where the user of the watch initiates the minute repeater complication, these three feeler gauges fly back. The minute gauge flies back against one of these four blades here, depending on the orientation at the time of this component. And where it hits one of these 14 graduations, you can see they're serrated. I'll just show a close-up picture of this dropping down on the screen now. And where this little feeler here, that you can see this little point, comes into contact with this, dictates just how far this rack, in actual fact it's this one because this is the minute rack, how far that goes back. Now, if it is allowed to go all the way back into the sort of origin of the blade here, or at one here, here or here, then this minute rack will fly all the way back, and all of the 14 serrations here, or teeth here, will cause the hammer to strike the gong. But if it flies back and just touches the end here, then it won't fly back far enough, maybe for any of these to strike the gong as the spring pushes the mechanism back forward. And the same is true for the quarter rack and the hour rack. So for example, if when we initiate the minute repeater complication, this little feeler flies back and touches this part of the snail, then it's going to strike out the hour one, because it hasn't been able to fly back very far. So this hour rack will have only flown back, and only one of these teeth will engage with the hammer. Now push it forward 1 hour, and this little feeler goes right into that corner there. This whole mechanism here, or component, the hour rack, flies all the way back, and as it is pushed back forward by the spring powering the repeater mechanism, all of these 12 teeth strike out. So Clearly it needs to be configured when we reconstruct the watch. Anyway, I'm going to show you this working when I have the watch put back together, but I just thought it was a good opportunity now to go through that in a little bit of, well, it's not in detail, but just give you the overview of that. Anyway, let's crack on and get this watch back up and running. So another good time to stop now and take a look at how this minute repeater is coming back together. You can see this is the dial side of the watch, and in the center of the frame here is the underside of one of the hammers. If I just spin around here, you can see the little prongs that come up against the racks to actually make the hammer strike. If I just come in a little bit closer on that, there we go. So quite in close now, just looking at that come out. That's in and out. Here underneath the main pinion, it's almost a wheel that you can see there. That is the main drive mechanism, the spring, and as you push this lever across, you can see that it will have the effect of powering up that spring. And then if we track across here, you can see now that I've put back the hour snail, and you can really see it clearly there. You can just see the little sensor finger there right in the center of the frame. Now if that was to be pushed forward, in fact let's just do it. If I can just manipulate this a minute, bear with, as they say. Where are we? There. So if we just push that in there, you can see now that that is as far back as the mechanism would be allowed to go, and that would strike out the time 12. But if we were then to move on 1 hour, okay, you can see that I've moved it forward 1 hour, and in this position it would strike out 1. The hour snail, of course, revolves when you're looking at it in this direction, in an anti-clockwise direction, because it's being driven around by the component in the center of the watch with the cannon pinion and the minute snail and the hours, the quarter snail on it, which is driving in naturally in the clockwise direction. So yeah, just a good point, a moment to catch up with where we are with the minute repeater mechanism here. All looking very shiny, and very little bit of lubricant on it here. The only other thing I would say is when you take one of these apart, make sure you really note the well, if it's working when you take it apart, make sure you really note the position of everything, so that when you go to put it all back, you do it in the right way. Now clearly if the watch isn't working when you do take it apart, then you're going to have to start working from first principles. But as I say, it's not too tricky, because it's not, intellectually speaking, it's not that complex a mechanism. The implementation of it is very, very intricate and fine. So guys, that's all we have time for part 1 of this rebuild video on the Henry Capt minute repeater. So stay tuned for part 2, when we will finish the reassembly and get the watch back in its case, and also do some analysis of how good the minute repeater is working and sounding, because the clarity of the gongs with the minute repeater is something that's really, really important. Anyway guys, so if you like my videos, then please subscribe, because I am making a lot of content at the moment, and I try to make it as informationally rich and as interesting and entertaining as possible. But for the moment, from Pembroke Dock here on the southwest coast of Wales, then cheerio from me, and God bless.